What's So Funny? Lessons from Canada's Leacock Medal for Humor Writing by Dick Bourgeois-Doyle. Lesson number 4. How one word can change a book. This is a review of the 1950 Leacock Medal winner, Turvey, by Earl Birney. In my dentist's office one morning in the fall of 2012, while I fumbled with my earphones, the female computer voice on my e-reader blurted out a loud stream of F-word swearing. It made a lasting impression on those around me, and the hygienists and the office staff still talk about it years later. My audio version of the picaresque novel Turvey, like my 1976 hardcover copy, bears the word unexpurgated in the title. Now this means that unlike the version that actually won the Leacock Medal back in 1950, it has lots of F-words. In the late 1940s, when the publisher, McClellan Stewart, reviewed Earl Birney's original manuscript, it feared negative reviews and reader reaction to what it called the Army talk, references to bodily functions and words that the late 1940s editors picked out as vulgar. The boss, Jack McClelland, pushed for milder language, believing that the prevailing Canadian sensibilities would not tolerate F-word swearing in a book. Birney fought back, saying he would rather produce a dirty-talking piece of reality than an expurgated bestseller. There was a standoff. The BC writer and World War II veteran, still burning over military bureaucracy, wanted to satirize this aspect of war while that memory was hot, and he knew that the book would have to sound authentic to resonate with soldiers. As evidenced by the different versions of Turvey, Birney lost that initial standoff with McClelland, and he knew that he wouldn't get the swear words by the church-based Ryerson Press, which was his usual publisher and the one that handled his poetry. And also, he'd been worn down by rejections from foreign publishers who thought the book was too Canadian, or conversely, that it didn't have enough Mounties, trappers, and pious habitants. Birney acquiesced and accepted the F-word deletions, and McClellan Stewart produced a sanitized Turvey in 1949, and it was this clean version that won the Leacock Medal a year later. Even with the swearing lifted out, Turvey probably had a ring of authenticity, though. Before the end of the book, the fighting leaves some characters with horrible wounds, while others suffer disease and a few die. It is, after all, a war story. Yet, it is also seriously funny. The reason the humor survives the story's frame lies in the personality of the protagonist, Private Thomas Leadbeater Turvey. Turvey embodies all the Canadian soldiers who signed up with naive intentions and little idea of what they had ahead of them. His story borders on farce, but the details and characters make it all seem just plausible. Turvey comes from a small town, Skookum Falls, in the interior of British Columbia, and like his creator, Birney, he identifies with BC totally. Aside from a general desire to defeat fascism, Turvey wants nothing more than to serve with his best friend, Mac McGillicuddy, in the BC regiment, the Kootenay Highlanders. Turvey's quest to get transferred and to get to the sharp end of military service provides the drama and the drive for this story. The humor breaks out of Turvey's misfortunes along the way. Sometimes he suffers bad luck, but more often he creates his own problems through gullibility and his interest in the opposite sex. Accident-prone, simple-minded, and light on education and commitment, Turvey does not excel at military life. By the end of the book, the Army has tried him out as a driver, a batman, a guard, a courier, and many other jobs. Although he finally makes it across the English Channel, he arrives in Europe well after D-Day and on the heels of the fighting. Turvey never sees what most of the World War II military called real action. Being one step removed from the horror, though, Turvey's enthusiasm seems almost reasonable, and this makes it possible to laugh at individual incidents. His path takes him into a minefield after a night at an English pub, into a confrontation with his own jacket, which he mistakes for a German paratrooper, and into prison for making too much noise with female companions while AWOL. Despite the misadventure, Turvey seems heroic in facing the real object of the satire, the institutions and the administration that surround him. The book takes aim in particular at the Army's human resource systems and the IQ-style evaluations that initially ranked Turvey as subpar and almost subhuman. The book concludes with him scoring extremely high after years of repeated test-taking practice. It takes skill to find humor in grim situations, and even greater skill to make it genuine when editors pluck real-world vocabulary out of the mouths of your characters. Bernie achieves his desired effect in the expurgated Turvey without the swearing by filling the Army talk conversations with subjects like alcohol, venereal disease, and the brass. He also makes sure that war still bled into the story through a smattering of second-hand accounts. This helped to make Turvey a window on a soldier's life in one post-war era. In another one, the book was also bolstered by Bernie's original wording. Canadian society changed over the next quarter century, and in the post-Vietnam, post-Woodstock, post-Lenny Bruce, George Carlin, National Lampoon, MASH world, McClellan and Stewart decided that the time might be right to dust off the original manuscript and send the swearing out into the world in that unexpurgated version of Turvey that I bought and I read. My hardcover book sits in a slick Robert Crumb Keep On Truckin' style jacket, and it reminds me of the 70s style Subversion. In this unexpurgated text, Bernie, the poet, made creative use of the four-letter words. They rarely appear in the same combinations, and by my count, he uses F in 5 different ways. The F word and F flying F and FU and F'd and I'm F'd and effing, and a harsh C word appears twice in novel combinations, such as those back in Ottawa and that C-faced sergeant. And Bernie rejects the bodily function-related S word as follows. Holy S, Sunday S, S the Commandant, S-faced turkeys up the S Creek, that recruiting S, horse S, have to sweat S, pinch a coon S, and S brown battle dress. In 1949, Jack McClellan blocked the publication of those kind of phrases and stopped the book that could have pushed the Canadian humor envelope a bit, but from the perspective of a book-selling businessman, he may have been right about his market. The expurgated Turvey, even with the swear words lifted out, still ran into trouble and drew criticism for its language. In this environment, the Leacock Medal judges might just have easily passed over my seemingly crude but more authentic 1976 swearing-filled version of Turvey if it had been available for the medal competition in 1950. Over 6 decades later, publications like the New York Times still fuss over the word in print, and people like me resort to prissy asterisks in writing and using the term F word to represent it in podcasts. But I know that Turvey would have been a better book and could have had more impact if left unexpurgated, and I'm glad that the publisher eventually issued it in this format. I'm also glad that this was the version I read, of course, except for that one day in my dentist's office. Now here's a writing exercise based on Turvey. Describe a group of soldiers raging about the brass in the aftermath of a firefight, without using swear words or mentioning foul language.